meeting, I have a few housekeeping arrangements to tell you about. This meeting will be recorded by the Council and uploaded to Southwark Council's YouTube channel tomorrow. Please note all guests will have their microphones muted when they join the meeting. You will be asked to remain on mute unless I ask you to speak, for example, in the 3-minute time slots reserved for objectors, the applicant, supporters and ward councillors. Please do not open your microphone until I have given you permission to speak. Attendees who are using the telephone dial-in function on the smartphone are asked to mute their microphones directly on their devices. Open microphones may cause feedback. To ensure that this virtual meeting runs smoothly, only one individual will be allowed to speak at a time. Any person speaking must be permitted to finish what they're saying without interruption. If I request that an individual stop speaking, they should do so immediately. Interruptions may result in you being disconnected from this meeting. If a member of the committee wishes to speak, could I ask them to indicate this via the raise hand symbol or on the message board? Or if I miss it, just call out. Members of the public are reminded that the message board is not for public use. Any messages left on the message board by members of the public will be disregarded by subcommittee members. Please note all guests will be made attendees after they have entered the meeting. A message should now have shown on your screen to indicate this has been done. Bearing in mind that a recording of this meeting will be posted on the Council's YouTube channel, if you are planning to speak at this meeting, you may choose to switch off your camera so that only your voice can be heard. Members of the public who are disconnected from the meeting due to technical difficulties should use the link or dial-in instructions they were sent initially to return to the meeting. Members of the public are welcome to record, screenshot or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. A copy of the Council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on Southwark website. During the meeting, members of this subcommittee will not access the internet except as it relates to the official business of the meeting, send or receive emails, texts, messages or tweets concerning the business of the subcommittee to anyone outside the meeting. Please note that members may be accessing the agenda papers via the internet. I would now like to ask officers to introduce themselves and explain their roles in this meeting. Firstly, the planning officers.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dipesh Patel. I am Senior Planning Officer at the meeting today, representing the Director of Planning, and I'm here to advise members of the subcommittee on planning and general issues relating to the application under consideration this evening.
Glenn?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Glenn Rowan. I'm the Planning Officer presenting and advising members on Subcommittee Item 7.1. That's for development land between 59 and 61 Roy Hill Park. That's the only item on today.
The Legal Officer?
Good evening. My name is Margaret Foley. I'm the Legal Officer for this meeting, and my role is to advise members of the subcommittee on legal matters related to planning and governance issues.
On the Clerk.
Good evening. My name is Gerald Golar. I'm the Constitutional Officer and Clerk of this subcommittee. I am here to minute the meeting and to advise on the procedure for hearing the item and for decision making.
Thank you. Apologies. I don't think we've received any apologies for this meeting. I believe we have a full house. Is that correct, Gerald?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you. We're now going to confirm voting members. I will ask the members of the subcommittee to confirm that they are a voting member of this committee. Councillor Jane Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am here and I'm a voting member.
Councillor Peter Babadou.
the chair and the voting member.
Councillor Sunil Chopra.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'm here. I'm a voting member as well. Thank you.
Councillor David Noakes.
Hello, Chair. Yes, I'm a voting member and I'm present.
Councillor Martin Seaton.
I'm here, Chair, and I'm also a voting member. Thank you.
Councillor Leanne Werner.
I'm here and I'm a voting member.
I can also confirm that I'm a voting member of this subcommittee. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensations in respect of any item issue to be considered at this meeting?
Is now joining.
No, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, item 5. Notification of any items of business which the Chair deems urgent. The following additional documents have been circulated before this meeting. An addendum report relating to item 7.1 and a members pack. Item 6, minutes. This is pages 1 to 3 of the agenda pack. Can we approve these amended minutes as a correct record of the meeting held on the 27th of April 2020?
Approved, Chair.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
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 Agreed, Chair.
Item 7, development management. The next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I would like to remind everyone of the subcommittee's guidance on the conduct of business. Officers will present the report, outline their recommendations and answer questions raised by the subcommittee. Then, if present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the subcommittee for no more than 3 minutes each. Firstly, one spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now, you need to have identified a single spokesperson. If more than one objector wishes to speak, the time will be divided accordingly within the 3-minute time slot. Following that, the applicant or their agent will have their 3 minutes, and then one spokesperson representing any supporters of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site. And finally, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. The meeting is not a hearing where all participants present evidence to be examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the subcommittee may ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should lead the subcommittee to subjects on which they would welcome further questioning. Ward members in attendance and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters and applicants may be asked to make further brief contributions in case any issues need to be clarified after they have addressed the meeting. This is not an opportunity to take part in the debate of the subcommittee. After receiving all submissions, the subcommittee will debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council subcommittee meeting which is open to the public, and there should be no interruptions from members of the public. Finally, I would like everyone present to know that although the planning committee comprises members from different political parties, we are not politically whipped. Our decisions are made in accordance with the council's planning policy and based on information contained within the relevant reports, together with consultation responses and any verbal submissions made today. How we approach these applications is set out in the Development Management Report as item 5, and if members are happy to note that report, we will move on to considering the planning application.
Thank you, Chair. That's fine.
Sorry, Chair, just to say that it's actually item 7, not 5. Sorry, that's my mistake.
Sorry. At item 7. Lovely. Okay, so we'll move on to consider the officer's report for item 7.1, development land between 59 and 61 Rye Hill Park, London SE15, pages 8 to 35 of the agenda pack and the relevant pages 1 and 2 of the addendum report. Considering the officer's report. Now, before Glenn speaks, I've been asked to say that we have received a late submission from the applicant. I forget the lady's name, sent an email today. We will not be considering what that email has contained. Some of the committee have not seen it, and we have not had chance, or the officer has not had chance to verify what's in that report or in that email. So that will not be considered at this committee. I'll now invite Glenn to present his report and any updates in the addendum. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Just give me one moment here and I'll share my screen. So I just don't seem to be given an option to share it. Not too sure what's happened here. Gerald, I don't know if you have to give me permission to share, maybe.
Glenn, normally, are you looking at the toolbar on the
there's
center
3
of the
buttons.
screen?
Yeah, 3 dots at the end. There's normally an option to share there.
It's the one next to it. It's the icon next to it. Not the 3 dots, but the icon next to it.
All I'm given is a button to hang up and a volume button. Yeah, I don't have the usual option, I'm afraid.
Can you send it to Depeche, or has Depeche got it?
Yeah, Depeche, are you able to share your screen?
I have the same thing, Chair, where I normally would be able to share the screen. That option doesn't seem to be there. Let me see if I can work out why that might.
I don't know. Sorry, it's Councillor Noakes here. When I first logged in, I also had a reduced toolbar, and when I logged out and logged back in again, I got a full toolbar. I don't know if it's
okay. In that case, then I might back out and join in if that would work.
Glenn, if you try it now.
I don't see anything just yet, but I'll maybe take Councillor Noakes' advice and just dial back in 1 second. No, I'm afraid I still don't have an option to share my screen. I don't know why.
Is there anything we can do, Gerald?
I have just made Glenn a presenter. Let's see whether that works.
Okay. No, could you maybe try it for Depeche if he can do it? Then.
Okay, I can see I'm a presenter now. So you've done that, Gerald. I'm sorry, I still don't have the option of sharing my screen. Gerald, can I send the presentation to you? And would you be able to share the screen if Glenn can ask you when to change the slides? Is that okay?
I can try.
Thank you, Gerald.
If that's difficult, I'm on the notes here again. I seem to have the share facility, so failing that, I can try and share it.
Have you got the members pack, David? Councillor Noakes?
Not sure.
It's on the end of the addendum.
Oh yes, but I don't know where it. I've got an email, I think, of it. I haven't got.
I can send it to you, Councillor Noakes, if Gerald can't. If Gerald's not successful, how are you getting on, Gerald?
Oh, okay.
Ah, marvellous. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Crack on then.
Okay, great. Sorry for the delay, everyone, and thanks, Joe,
right.
for helping us out. Okay, as you can see, the application is for development of a 10 units, which would be in the form of a 6-storey building, as well as a portion of open space on a currently vacant site. As you can see there from the description, the units would be 4 social rent units and 6 shared ownership. Gerald, if you could pop to the next slide, please. The site itself, as I said, is previously undeveloped land. It is located on the sort of northeastern side of Rye Hill Park, and Nunhead Reservoir is located to the northeast boundary of the site. It's bounded by residential properties on either side, and the road of Rye Hill Park to the south. The site itself has a number of designations, including a woodland TPO and metropolitan open land, which we'll come back to both in a bit. As well as that, it's located within the suburban density zone and the Peckham and Nunhead action area. I believe one of the objections raised the concerns about the site as a site of importance of nature conservation or a sink. The site itself is not a sink. Nunhead Reservoir is, but the site itself is not. Jared, if you could move to the next slide, please. Yep, so just to give some context, the existing site, as I say, has never been developed. It's relatively overgrown and it's quite inaccessible to the public at the moment. There is a relatively large wall located the entire way around the site. Gerald, if you move to the next slide, we can actually see that. Yeah, so as I say, the site is completely inaccessible to the public at the moment. Onto the development itself, Gerald, if you want to move on to the next slide. As I say, the development would be a part 5, part 6-storey building comprised of 10 flats. They'd be 100% affordable, as I mentioned earlier on, comprising 4 social rent units and 6 shared ownership, which is an increase from the initial version of the scheme of 4 social rent units. The initial scheme that had come in was for 10 intermediate, but we have negotiated up to 4 social rent as part of that. Another very important part of the scheme is the introduction of a pocket park located, as we're looking straight on here from the south elevation, to the left-hand side of the site. This would be approximately 600 square meters of public open space, of which the public access and the maintenance and upkeep of the site would be maintained through the Section 106 agreement. As well as that, the site the proposal also includes, as part of the 106, a contribution for a 400 square metre wildflower meadow. This wouldn't be on site, this would be at Bletchley Gardens, at a site identified by the council's ecologist. Bletchley Gardens is about 0.7 of a mile away from the site, or about a 15-minute walk. The units themselves, there would be 9 3-bedroom 4-person units and 1 2-bed 3-person unit, including a wheelchair unit, which is policy compliant in that regard. It also provision for 14 cycle parking spaces and 2 car parking spaces. The applicant has also provided, or would also provide for 3 years car club membership for all eligible residents as part of the 106. There's been a total of 8 objections and 1 neutral comment. This includes 1 additional objection which has come in this morning, so it isn't part of the addendum, but the objection raised concerns around parking, which are already covered in the officer's report. The key objections have been around the development on metropolitan open land, so that's the key issue of the scheme, as well as concerns around parking and biodiversity. And sorry, trees have also come up as part of the objections. On the issue of development on MOL, as you'll see from the officer's report, sorry, Jared, if you could also just move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. As you can see from the officer's report, the proposal does not meet the tests for development on metropolitan open land, which are typically reserved for things like sport and outdoor recreation. And as such, residential accommodation is unusual and a departure from policy. It's also important to stress the application has been advertised as a departure from policy. Notwithstanding that, we think there's significant material benefits to the scheme which outweigh this departure or justify this departure from policy. In particular, the 100% affordable nature of the scheme, the family-sized housing, and Jared, if you move on to the next couple of slides, we'll see some of the floor plans. Yeah, just the next one after that, please. Sorry, after that again. Yeah, if we keep going, there's floor plans up ahead. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so 100% affordable family-sized units for the most part, the enhanced public realm and the net biodiversity gain. If we take in combination the enhanced public open space of the site, as well as the high-quality design of the building, another benefit of this scheme is the fact that it would improve what is at the moment quite an unattractive, unsightly site, which the public has absolutely no access to, or there's no way of them to get through it, or there's no public amenity or value out of it, or limited, I should say. On parking, which has also come up as sort of a key issue, the applicant has submitted a parking survey conducted in the Lambeth methodology, which is the standard parking survey methodology, and has been reviewed by our transport planners. What it's demonstrated is that there is adequate on-street parking capacity, and they would also be offset by the provision of 2 car parking spaces on site, which would be an acceptable number given the number of units. And sort of, finally, just on biodiversity, the site has not been identified as a roosting site for bats. There's about 6 species of bird identified on the site, and it would be it's also used as a foraging site for hedgehogs. Again, while a large portion of the green space on site would be retained, there would be some loss of on-site biodiversity, which would be offset again by that wildflower meadow contribution in the 106. Finally, just on trees, there'd be 9 category C trees lost, as well as 200 small saplings, which would be under 500 centimeters in diameter. So these are incredibly small trees. The placement of the development to the eastern side of the site has been done intentionally to minimise the impact on some of the larger, more mature trees located in the centre and other boundary of the site, which is a positive aspect of the scheme, and it goes to show there has been some work on that. 16 trees are being proposed as planted, and just to note that is the addendum noted 15 trees we planted. That's a small typo. It would be 16 trees proposed being planted, and the additional loss of canopy cover will be mitigated by a mitigation payment in Section 106 for £1,448. That is also in the addendum as down from the initial the estimated contribution towards trees is approximately £30,000, but due to increased on-site planting, that figure has reduced substantially. Just a final point to mention on the so just tie everything together, we have an improved affordable housing offer to include 4 social rent units, which weren't originally part of the scheme, as I noted, and we think this is a key reason that the scheme has demonstrated that it has justified the departure from policy. There's just a few other points of order I just want to tidy up from the addendum and some other bits. A few conditions have been mentioned in the officer's report which were not included in the draft recommendation. These are the ones around the woodland management plan, hard and soft landscaping details, bat and bird boxes, and a drainage strategy, but these should all be included in the final decision notice if a grant planning permission is made. And just regarding the condition on materials, there's a small typo in that, but that would be updated to reflect that material sample and material details will be requested of all external facing materials. And yep, that's pretty much everything I need to cover. So I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Glenn. Have any, David, Councillor Noakes, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if it'd be useful to quickly, I just noticed that there's a couple of discrepancies in the report and the addendum, and I just wondered if officers can very quickly confirm which is correct in each case. So on cycling provision, it says in paragraph 8 that there are 14 cycling spaces. On paragraph 66, it says there's going to be 18. So just clarity as to which it is. On the 10-year split, the social rent in paragraph 7, it talks about 4 social rent, but in the conclusion paragraph, it says 3 social rent. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that's 4, but I just want it so that it's on the record.
Yes, sorry, please carry on.
And there was one other, the green space in paragraph 63, it talks about 80% of the green space, 80% of the site will be green space. And in addendum paragraph 6, it says 58%, which I think I may know the answer to, but I think it would just be useful for the record that everyone's clear on the figures.
Yep, sure. So just on the 10-year split is the easy one to answer. That is a typo, and it is a holdover from when the offer of the affordable housing has changed over time, as I noted. So initially it was 10 shared ownership units, then that was increased to 3 social rent units and 7 shared ownership units, and it has since increased to 4 4 social rent units and 6 shared ownership. On the open space versus green space, and this is slightly perhaps tricky to explain, the 58% refers to the public open space which would be secured by the Section 106 agreement. So that's the area of the site which would be secured again as public open space and would need to be maintained as that. The 80% figure refers to the amount of green space on site, so this would include that 58%, including as well landscaping on the element of the site which would not be retained as, or not be well retained as public open space, if that makes sense. And just on parking, I believe the correct figure is
cycling.
Sorry, cycle parking. I believe the correct figure is 14, but just give me a couple of moments, I can just check on that again and maybe just come back to you on that point, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Werner, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I have a question regarding parking. It was my understanding that any new development there won't be any parking. So you mentioned that there's going to be 2 parking spaces. Mm-hmm. Is that for the disabled? Is that disabled parking?
It is not explicitly disabled parking, as far as I can recall. The developments we do encourage car-free developments. Exceptions to be made in instances where, for example, public transport accessibility would be quite low, and in this case, the public transport accessibility of the area is quite low. I believe it's about 1 or 2, off the top of my head. So we're relatively satisfied that in this instance, the small amount of parking is acceptable. We've also included a condition around electric vehicle charging points to encourage more sustainable transport as part of that.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Seaton, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ruan, for his presentation. Just to clarify, the use of the term public park in paragraph 88. Just to be clear, so will we designate this as a public park, or is this simply a phrase being used for purpose of this committee? Would it be designated as a public park, the remaining area which is not being built on?
So that 608 square meters would be retained in the Section 106 as a public open space. So the access to it by the public is maintained in perpetuity. So hopefully this somewhat answers the question, but I understand the developers use the term pocket park in a number of the documents, but in terms of public open space, the idea behind this is that the access to it is maintained for the public at all times, and that it's not, shut off at any point or something like that. So that's what's meant in that sense by public open space.
And who is managing that public open space? Is it Southwark?
No, that would be secured by I believe it would be the landowner as part of the Section 106 would be required to manage the sort of upkeep and maintenance of it. So the council shouldn't be liable for that.
Okay. So I think somebody's got their hand up. Councillor Chopra.
Thanks, Chair. Just want to understand a little bit about this balconies issues. Would that impact the neighbors, like overviewing their properties, or there'll be any issues about the neighbor when people are standing or sitting on the balcony? Would that be any concern about the balconies? I want to know a little bit more about that.
No, in terms of the balconies, we're pretty satisfied there's not a privacy issue. Their views are primarily towards either Nunhead Reservoir or across Roy Hill Park towards the tower blocks on the other side of the road, and those views are well in excess of, I believe, they're well over 20-30 meters. So it's relatively secure. In terms of privacy, we shouldn't have a concern about that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Werner, you have another question?
Yeah, I do. Sorry. So I just wondered. So we're going to lose trees on the site. So the value of the trees we're going to lose, will they be equivalent to the value of the trees we're going to gain on the site? So in terms of maturity and absorbing carbon, all those things.
So in terms of the loss of trees versus what's being replanted on site, the number being lost is 9 and the total being planted is 6, but obviously that doesn't necessarily mean the same quantity or same value of tree is being put in. So our urban foresters have assessed it and determined that payment of 1,448 would fully offset the loss of the canopy coverage on site, which in policy terms is what we try to avoid. We try to avoid a loss of canopy cover, and where it's not possible, a mitigation payment is sought. So
can you just remind me where that mitigation payment will go?
It will go towards replanting in the borough, is my understanding.
Okay, and it will be the equivalent in terms of value of those trees?
Yeah, it's to ensure that there's no loss in that regard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And sorry, Chair, if I may just follow on for that question. I think, Glenn, you might mention 6. I think there are 16 trees that would be going back in.
Sorry, 16.
And they are there'll be younger specimens. And I think Councillor Werner, you asked about sort of carbon storage. So younger specimens, they'll grow, so that they'll sequester some carbon from the atmosphere.
But I'm just in terms of the equivalent we're going to lose. But I believe that those measures will mitigate the effects of the loss. Right?
They would. That's right.
Okay. Thanks. That's my understanding. Thank you for clarifying.
Councillor Noakes, you have a question?
I do, Chair. Thank you. I just want to pick up actually on Councillor Seaton's point about the description of the 58% of the land as being a public park. I've got sort of 2 questions to this. One is, I know the officer sort of indicated, but can I be absolutely clear that the current land is not accessible at all? I know it's got a wall around it, but in part of the report, it sort of didn't seem to completely rule out that people can currently get into that area. So I don't know if you can provide any clarity about that, because if it can currently be accessed, then obviously you could argue that some people would still enjoy the wooded area. And then my second question is that if it's going to be developed to 58% as a sort of public space, I mean, does that require it, for example, to have benches? So that, because I mean, how would people not know that it's just the garden essentially of the new block? I mean, would there be anything done to make it welcoming to anyone passing by to come and sit in there? Or because it's rather, as it's metropolitan land, it's quite crucial, this question in my view.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. And just to so I'll take the second point first, and I would suggest you just to repeat the first. But in terms of sort of amenity and facilities on site, we would secure by condition a detailed landscaping plan. So we could, as part of that landscaping plan, include measures like hard and soft landscaping, such as benches or banks to sit on or something like that. So that is something we could secure by condition. And so you'll have to remind me the first part of your question again.
Was it just about whether the site is absolutely not accessible at the moment?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes. When I went down there on the other visit, it's effectively impossible to get into. I mean, sorry, you could, I suppose, if you absolutely wanted to, perhaps scramble over the wall. But it's a site of fly tipping and this large wall around it, so you struggle quite a bit to get into it. And whether there's any amenity value from the site itself, I personally wouldn't think so. I don't really see what value it would have in that regard when I went down on the site visit, admittedly quite a while ago, but my understanding is it's been like that for quite a while.
Thank you.
I'm concerned that this may set a precedent that to build on MOL land, all you have to do is neglect your piece of land for long enough, and then so that will allow you to build on it. What would you say to that?
Well, I think there's I suppose there's three key elements of this proposal that make the departure from policy acceptable. Part of it is the affordable housing, which I think is a very good element of the scheme and much needed in a lot of ways. Second part of it is that it opens this up to the general public. There is a significant public benefit in that regard, and that the local community here are going to be getting a small but nonetheless quite valuable little amenity space. Will be maintained for them, and the upkeep is looked after. And tying those 2 points together, the existing site, as you kind of touched on the point, is not much to look at. It doesn't really have much to the street scene. This would greatly enhance the local street scene and the local public realm quite significantly. So in terms of setting a precedent in that regard, I can't comment too much on the intents of the people who may own or may not own metropolitan open land, so I don't know. But in this instance, it would significantly improve this particular piece quite a lot, which I think is a very valuable aspect of the scheme.
I would like to bring in Margaret, just the legal officer, just to comment on whether it sets a precedent or not, using MOL land for residential development.
Yes, Chair. Well, the matter is addressed in the report, so perhaps we should just turn to that. And you have referenced there at paragraph 28 to the policy in the London Plan at 717, which refers to the strongest protection should be given to London's metropolitan open land, and inappropriate development refused, except in very special circumstances. And this land has the same protection as Greenbelt, as recognised by the National Planning Policy Framework. So the test that's before you today as a subcommittee is that very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness. And you will note that in paragraph 30, the development of this housing is described as inappropriate development on metropolitan open land. That can only be acceptable to you if that harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. You've heard from the planning officer that, in his opinion, there are significant public benefits which outweigh the harm to this land. So that is a matter of judgment for you. If any further applications come forward on other sites, the same test will apply. But you are quite right to note that this land has a very protected status, equivalent to Greenbelt in both national and local policy terms.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Babadoo, who hasn't spoken yet?
Thank you, Chair. In your question, I just want to make sure I understand the for want of a better word, the exception one would be relying upon to decide to approve this development. The text quite clearly notes that all of the exceptions noted don't apply. But then in 31, it's about us being able to kind of weigh up against the kind of broader benefits. Could I just be clear? Like, is there any specific wording which informs our ability to weigh this up? Is it just the kind of general fact that we can weigh up public benefit, or is there some other prescribed like way that we're supposed to assess the relative benefits of this?
I think I'll refer to Margaret on that one. I think she has her hand raised.
Yeah. Go ahead, Margaret.
I think it's worth repeating that the test that is being considered is the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 144. If you like, I can read that out again. Is that helpful?
Yes. Yes.
It says, when considering any planning application, local planning authorities should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the green belt. The term green belt is used there, but it also applies to metropolitan open land. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt by reason of inappropriateness, which, as noted, is the case here, and any other harm resulting from the proposal. So it's not just harm to the green belt, but any other harm caused by this development is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Those will be other material planning considerations. So it is a very serious balancing test of judgment for you here today, members.
Councillor Abudu, have you finished?
Dual hand raise. I'll get rid of that.
Okay. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm fortunate that my two preliminary questions have been answered by and responded to by Margaret. Thank you for that. Can I just double check in terms of the history of the site? I understand that it is adjacent to I think it's owned by the water company, I believe. Is that right? And if so, was this site sold as an enclosed site, as we find today, or was it part of the adjacent site where was it part of the adjacent site, therefore accessible at some point? I'm trying to understand, was it sold this way, an enclosed area that was not accessible? It seems unlikely, but if you could maybe just bring us up to date.
Councillor Seaton and Chair, sorry, do you mind if I just comment on that?
Yeah.
I think there was some connection with the reservoir, but that might be a question the applicant can answer. They'll be aware of the purchasing history of the site.
Right, yeah. In that case, Chair, I'll hold my other question for the applicant. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Chopra, have you got another question?
No further question. Thank you at the moment.
Okay. Right. I think we should move on. So I haven't been notified of any objectors who wish to speak, but does anyone present wish to speak in objection to this application? If you can unmute your microphone and...
Chair, nobody has registered to speak as an objector.
Okay. And nobody's put anything in the chat. Okay. So we now move on to the applicant. So, or the applicant's agent. I believe Helen Cuthbert is here and Kim Humphreys, and if you can introduce anybody else who wishes to speak. Helen, are you speaking first?
Yeah, yes, I was going to take up the 3 minutes for the applicant, but we have, as you can probably see from the screen, a full suite of experts here. If you have any further queries on trees or ecology, the architect's here as well, and Kim Humphreys, who dealt with all the consultation. So I can hopefully deal with any queries you have, but if anybody wants to ask one of the team, they're all here.
Okay, so I'm going to time you for 3 minutes, and please direct the members to questions where you would like them to ask. Okay, your time starts now.
Thank you. The site, as we've heard, was previously owned by Thames Water, and it did once provide access to the Nunhead Reservoir. But the whole of the Nunhead Reservoir and this site are now fenced off. And this site is fenced as a separate element from the wider reservoir. The site isn't in a conservation area, but it is covered by a woodland tree preservation order. It is, as you've heard, designated as metropolitan open land, but it hasn't functioned as that since the Water Authority was privatised back in 1989. And that's essentially when this piece of land got left behind and has no function really. The trees that are on the site are largely self-seeded, and there's no access to the site. It was sold by Thames Water to my client in 2014, and it was already in a bad state of repair back then. My client felt that there was an opportunity for small-scale development, which would also enable the opening up of the land. And 2 public events were held in 2017 and 2018 to explain the plans and receive feedback. Following the submission, further meetings were held with officers and councillors to finalise the proposals. And whilst you've heard that development on MOL is something that Southwark would not generally support, the NPPF does allow for these small infill affordable housing developments as an exception, where very special circumstances allow the development. And we think those circumstances exist here. The proposal is wholly affordable. The land does not currently function as metropolitan open land in any way. It's closed off. And there are public benefits associated with the development through the creation of this publicly accessible pocket park. We'd be happy to have signage as part of the landscaping condition to make sure it's quite clear that it is publicly accessible land. There's also the wider and longer term potential of creating a new route through to Nunhead railway station and potentially to the reservoir as a whole, subject to Thames Water and discussions. You've heard about the development of the scheme. It's for 4
30 seconds
and 6 shared homes. They are all family homes except for the wheelchair accessible unit. So they're all good homes for affordable for local families. And I think you've pretty much had everything else covered off by officers. I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Very good timing. Thank you. Councillor Seaton, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll repeat my earlier question to you, if I may, Helen. This piece of land, it was sold as an enclosed piece of land, I'm assuming, and it previously had connections with sort of adjacent land holdings. My first question, if I can get an answer to that, and I can ask my second question, if that's okay, Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good.
As I said, it was originally all part of the development of the Nunhead Reservoir, but both the reservoir and this piece of land were fenced off, and this element bricked off, and I don't actually know when, but for considerable, at least 20 years ago, I think, this piece of land. We're not entirely sure. I mean, it seems to me that this was once in public ownership and publicly accessible, you know, back in the Victorian age, and it was really part of metropolitan open land from that stage forward. But really what's happened over time is The land has been the land has been taken by Thames Water and privatised essentially, and this development would allow it to come back into some more function as open land. So it has a benefit from that perspective that hasn't been in there for at least 30 years.
If I may, Chair, just my second question very quickly. Thank you, Rhiannon, for that response. In other words, it was sold as an enclosed piece of land, but it was sold on the basis that it was designated MOL. Can I ask, and this may be pushing somewhat, at the point of sale, was there an obligation to maintain the land and at some point to make it publicly accessible as part of an agreement that it clearly is MOL and therefore has special status, particularly in planning terms?
Well, I think the policy is quite clear from the Southwark plan and the designation. So you couldn't you couldn't go into this willingly without knowing that, basically. So there was no requirement from the sale, but there certainly was from policy.
Okay, Councillor Werner. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. I just wanted to ask how environmentally friendly the scheme is in terms of construction and the architecture of the building.
Could I ask the architect deal with that question? Who's here?
Certainly.
Jan, if you can.
Hi there. Yes, the scheme has been designed to actually be very efficient in terms of its material use. So there's an efficiency in terms of the layout, the mass of the building, its orientation. The flank walls are intended to be quite heavily insulated and therefore increase the U values. In other words, the sort of energy use of the units will be reduced because there are sort of large flank walls. And just the envelope, the glazing that we see at each end, that's intended to be triple glazed units, which will be highly efficient. So the fabric of the building will be extremely efficient. We're intending to use the top roof, the top level of the story of the building, the roof of the building, for solar panels. All of that will be PV. And so therefore, in summary, we think that the scheme will be very energy efficient in its use. And at the next stage, when we're looking to source things like the bricks and so on, we'll be very careful to use specific brick types which are of a sustainable source.
Great, thank you. And can I just ask, will it be constructed on site or off site? And what is the carbon footprint, the construction of the building likely to be?
I can't give you the exact carbon footprint of the building. We're still looking at the construction methodology. There are a number of different approaches that we might take to construct this building, which could actually be a combination of some on-site and some off-site fabrication.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for answering my question.
Councillor Noakes.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, I'll let the applicant decide who's best to answer this, but I just wanted to pick up, I suppose, on the point that I made earlier on and was touched upon by Helen, which is about, it's very clear in the report that this is an exception if we were to agree this application, and the benefits that are being sold to us are obviously that it's 100% affordable as in regards to the housing, and that there's going to be a new publicly accessible area. And you touched on about the suggestion about putting up signage, but because I'm just very, depending on how you design the green space, if you just design it so it looks like the front garden or part of the new development, people might not think that it's something they can come onto, and therefore, it'll just essentially be a garden for the 10 residents, which is very nice for them, obviously. But obviously, in this particular circumstance, the reason to allow the housing would be that it is clearly a public space that the local people can go into, and to me that needs to therefore have benches, for example. But it's really crucial that the design is clear and perhaps the signage as well. So I don't know if you do want to add on anything to reassure me, because it's very crucial in how I decide to vote, I think.
Yeah. The starting point really is the means of enclosure. The fact that currently there's a very high brick wall that surrounds the entirety of the site, which Glenn described as you'd have to clamber over to get into it. So the first point is how you treat the means of enclosure to make it welcoming. And I think that's something that we can make it clear as part of the design of the hard and soft landscaping, that this is publicly accessible and not a garden. And as I say, that can be dealt with signage as well. It's certainly our intention to do that. This would create a nice, attractive woodland area, quite a natural woodland space with all the trees maintained. And at the moment, as I say, it's quite a mess. So I think it would be an attractive space that there's quite a lot of people who can look into this space and see that it's there for them, and I'm quite sure we can make that clear in our design.
Thank you.
Okay, nobody else with their hand up. Has anybody else got any questions for the applicant? Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Just further clarification again, Helen, on the split between intermediate and social rented. Now, typically, if we had a scheme like this, an obligation would be made to take residents from the council's waiting list. How will those who take advantage of the social rent properties, how will they be selected? Would you be going to the council? What systems might you apply?
The building, when it's complete, would be managed by registered social landlord, Oregon Asra, who would then deal with the council and the council's list on the social rental element, and they would also deal with the shared ownership element. So it would be with the registered social landlord.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's everybody. So thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move on now to any supporters who live within 100 metres of the development site and wish to speak in support of the application. I don't believe. Go ahead, Gerald.
No, Chair, there's nobody that's registered to speak in that slot. Okay.
So we'll move on to ward councillor. So I believe Vicky Mills, Councillor Mills, is here. She's raised her hand.
I think Councillor Hanvass is here as well, Chair. So I don't know if we can split the 3 minutes between us.
Yeah, by all means. So if you'd like to, both of you introduce yourselves first.
So I'm Councillor Vicky Mills, and I'm one of the ward councillors for Peckham Rye Ward.
Hello, I'm Councillor Renata Hanvass, and I'm the other councillor who represents Peckham Rye Wards. Thank you.
Okay, you have 3 minutes between you. I'll let you know when a minute and a half is gone.
Okay, so Chair, I wanted to speak in favour of the application. This evening you're being asked to kind of weigh up the kind of value of metropolitan open land and the special protection that has versus the things that we are going to gain from the application. And I think in terms of material planning considerations, there are enough to tip the balance in favour of the application. So I think a scheme that is 100% affordable with 40% at social rent is great in an area where we don't see very much housing and we have much less social housing than other bits of the borough. I think this will be a big improvement to the streetscape. As we've said, you know, this is currently metropolitan closed land, and there is an opportunity to create actual proper metropolitan open land, and I think that's a good thing. I'm not wholly convinced that I want the committee to be designing that land, just because, you know, we have a wealth of green space in this bit of the borough. So I kind of like think in terms of creating a public park. I'm not sure I want the committee to do this, but I think, you know, having a kind of agreement that a detailed landscaping plan would be submitted would be a good thing to ask for. I think the route through to Nunhead Station would be a big bonus. And I suppose the thing that I want to be absolutely clear about is in terms of securing the kind of regular day-to-day maintenance and also the long-term maintenance of the site, and just making sure that the agreement on that is really firm. So the issue we have at the moment with this being kind of tatty, fly-tipped, is lost. Finally, I'm fairly sure that Water Mews and Dominic Court were built on metropolitan open land, and they are adjacent to this. But I'll hand over to Renata.
Thank you. Just to, I'm pretty sure as well that Water Mews was also, that it was built on metropolitan open land, and in fact there has been planning granted to extend Water Mews further onto the metropolitan open land, but they haven't started building the extension, which may actually make it possible to put a footpath through to Nunhead Station at the edge of the Thames waterland, which local residents really would like. There used to be one which was covered by a previous extension to Water Mews. But just to say, that this is a very slopey site. I've lived in the area over 20 years. To my knowledge, while I've lived in the area, it's never been open. There's a very high fence. Residents have never, to my knowledge, been able to go on it. And I think that this actually is an improvement to the site because they will be able to get access. And also there's a huge demand for social housing of that sort of calibre, family-sized housing. There's a huge shortage of it within our ward, and therefore I'm also supportive of this application. Thank you.
Oh, that's perfect timing as well. Well done. Any questions for the Councillor Noakes?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the ward councillors for their presentations. I suppose I probably just want to pick up. I mean, either can answer or both, but particularly with Vicky, I just wanted to. So I mean, obviously, to me, it seems important that what is being sold to us as new green space that's available to the public looks like that it's available to the public and doesn't look like just a garden of the flats. But you said that you didn't really want us to get involved in designing a new pocket park. I mean, do you think if this green land is made publicly accessible, do you think there'll be residents who will use it? I mean, is there a need? I have to say you're more familiar than I am with the area. So is it the sort of space that people would stop in on their way home, etc.? And secondly, can you just clarify what you mean when you don't want us to design it as a public park? So how do you want, how will it be accessible, or how will it be obvious it's accessible? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're kind of, landscape architects here. Maybe you feel differently. And I'm just conscious that this is immediately next to a very substantial green spaces on the Rye Hill and Rye Hill Park estate. And it's also incredibly close to Peckham Rye Park, which is, a big, massive, one of our, biggest parks. So I'm just conscious that if you kind of, try to create a pocket park and stick lots of benches in, I'm not totally convinced people will choose that in favour of sitting on Peckham Rye Park. So I think, you make an important point. It's got to be clearly publicly accessible, but I think it needs to offer something a little bit different to the other green spaces around it. So, I'd be keen that, perhaps we have a condition about there being a kind of, landscape, the landscaping is agreed with the council. But I'm just not sure that I want us to say tonight it must have benches and it must have a big sign saying Rye Hill Pocket Park, because I'm not sure that those are the things that will make it, a really special additional green space in the area.
Thank you, that's helpful.
You mentioned that other adjacent sites have been built on metropolitan open land. How long ago was that?
Yeah, so sorry, it was when Helen said 1989, and just thinking about the makeup of that land, I'm sure that Dominic Court, which is almost adjacent to this site, will probably date from the early 90s, and it strikes me that that was probably built on the reservoir land as well. And Water Mews, which is kind of on another little bit of the reservoir, I'm trying to download the applications. They date from kind of 2005, maybe another one in 2007, and there's also been one in the kind of last year to 18 months, and I'm fairly sure that they were metropolitan open land as well. And we made the decision, or planning in Southwark made the decision to build on metropolitan open land in this particular area, because obviously weighing up the balance, that was the decision made. I can't say kind of 100% sure, but from the Water Mews application I can see here, it does look like that was metropolitan open land.
Thank you. Councillor Noakes, your hand is still up. Do you have another question?
No, sorry, Chair.
Okay. Anybody else have a question for the ward councillors? In that case, thank you very much for your presentations and your support for this application. We'll move on now to any further clarifications for the officers before we go to debate. Councillor Noakes.
Sorry, I do have one question. So it's actually in relation to the biodiversity issue. So the site currently has the woodland TPO on it, the Tree Preservation Order, I think it stands for, which sounds like it should mean that the trees can't be taken down, that they should be protected. But obviously, as in all policy, it seems that there are exceptions can be made. So, one, is there an officer here who can just tell me what the woodland TPO does protect, essentially? Does it just protect the sort of replacement? And the second point is, in regards to the biodiversity, because obviously it's a wooded area at the moment, and it's got a number of birds on and wildlife in it. Obviously, we're going to plant the 400 square meters of wildflower meadow elsewhere. But I mean, are we not losing something and losing a wooded area that birds are nested in and other wildlife? Is that actually being replaced by this 400 square meters of wildflower meadow? Thank you.
Can I just, if it's okay, Chair, I can answer those two questions. So the designation of a tree preservation order means that it doesn't necessarily mean that the tree itself it's given extra protection, but it means that any works to the tree needs to be agreed with the council. And in this case, any work to trees within the woodland tree preservation order need to be agreed with the council. So they do afford them protection, but in this instance, the trees that would be lost, I think as Glenn mentioned in his presentation, are category C trees. So the categories go from A, B, C and U. U are ones that either are very low value or could be dangerous. C are the sort of lowest category of the other three, and their replacement planting would be better in terms of woodland management, but the canopy cover would not be mitigated completely, which is why there's the just over £1,000 mitigation. So I hope that answers that question on the TPO. With regards to biodiversity, you're right in where I think you'd got to, Councillor Noakes, that there would be biodiversity loss on this particular site because of the replacement of the trees and the development that would take place. But overall, the proposal would result in a biodiversity gain because of the mitigation, and that's the Wildflower Meadow. I think it's on the Camberwell View Cemetery.
Any follow-up, David?
Only a thought. I suppose if you're a bird in nesting in the tree and then you get to a wildflower meadow instead, it's not necessarily going to make up the tree house that you've lost. But anyway, I probably can't debate this any further. But thank you for the.
I don't think they do any tree works when they're in nests, when it's the nesting season.
Is that right? Can we get confirmation about that in terms of nesting and wildlife.
Yes, so it would be against the Habitat Directive for work to be taken when on any trees with nests. But if members are looking for some additional insurance, if you are minded to resolve to grant, we could you could consider a condition that prohibits any felling of the trees during nesting period.
I think that sounds like a good idea.
As it's a woodland preservation. Any other questions from members to officers? David, your hand's still up.
Actually, I meant to take it down, but I just have a potential suggested change to a condition, but I'll take that. I'm not sure if you want to take that yet or later on.
I think later.
Later, okay.
Okay, Councillor Mills has put in the chat, initial part of Watermews is not MOL, but looks like the second set of houses was MOL and the third development of 2 houses is MOL. Is that your understanding, Dipesh?
Hi, Chair. I've currently I've not had a look at the history, so forgive me on that. But I'm just having a look at the MOL plan on our mapping system, and Watermews is the boundary of the Metropolitan Open Land or the Nunhead Reservoir, according to what I've got in front of me, does not include the any of the properties on Watermews. So I'm just going by what I'm looking at. I'm just checking. No, and it comes to the site. So from the map, I can see the MOL site does not cover. It does cover parts of the rear of number 61 Ryle Park, but the boundary does not show. That does not encroach onto any part of Watermews. I don't know whether the MOL was changed at some point after the development took place, but that's what the boundary is currently.
If we allow this development to happen, does the land remain MOL?
Yes, so the land would, the MOL status would remain on the land, and any future proposal would, again, the site and would be protected by the MOL policies.
Including the area that it's built on?
Including that area.
Okay, so let's go to debate. I'm finding this quite tricky, actually. I don't know if anybody wants to chime in with what their thought process is going through. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. And like you, I am going through some concern, and I expressed that concern at an earlier briefing. Clearly, the officer's case in the report is pretty clear that we are going against policy, but there may well be an exceptional circumstance. My question on the history of the site, I wanted to understand if it was sold as an enclosed piece of land and therefore was not accessible at any time during its history. It does seem quite odd for it to be sold in that format. And I also note, I've asked this question, and if I'm wrong, please others tell me otherwise, that as an authority, who is the custodian for what happens to MOL land, we do not insist that MOL land in private hands must be maintained appropriately. Okay? Which of course, and I believe that is the case. If I could clarify, that is the case. And assuming it is, it therefore means that an enclosed piece of land like this can be argued is akin to a derelict piece of land, not usable, and therefore, despite its special status, we are obliged to consider it for housing development. Okay? And of course, in other parts of the borough, I'm conscious of planning creep, particularly in the north of the borough, in conservation areas, there's planning creep, where we are creeping and slowly reducing both the size and integrity of conservation areas. Here, of course, it's metropolitan open land. But despite all my misgivings, I have visited the site on 5 separate occasions just to satisfy myself. I know that Councillor Mills will like the sound of this. I have visited the site on 5 separate occasions. I've actually taken the trouble to peep over the fencing and have a look inside, and I can see it is curious that it's been allowed to get in that condition. But as I said, as a custodian with an overview, we're not obliged to insist it's maintained. Nevertheless, the applicant has produced a proposal which provides for 100% affordable homes. The applicant has confirmed and registered RSL will manage these homes, and the applicants confirm as a result of that, the residents who may find themselves in these properties will be taken from the council's waiting list. And if I've got that wrong, please someone correct me, I'd be most grateful. And lastly, what I am concerned at the loss of some tree coverage, and particularly where those trees possess a TPO, which is our reason why we apply TPO is to protect trees. But nevertheless, I'm concerned about that. But nevertheless, provided this remains open land for residents to visit. I note in the report it says use of term park, but it's been qualified by officers as being an open space. But in the report it says park, and if the officers want to correct that, correct the report, that's fair enough. I don't mind that. I'm very keen to what both Councillor Hanvas and Mills have said in relation to the type of amenity space it will now create for neighbours and others. It should be just the run-of-the-mill park. I'm on your side in that regard. The design is quite interesting. It is quite an interesting design, but I want to make it clear, though, Chair, that we take extremely seriously the protection of metropolitan open land and retaining that land for the public good. I must say I'm always quite prickly when I hear of land that's held in private hands, but it's not accessible to the public, and they allow that land to become fallow. I strongly object to that type of behaviour. But on this occasion, as this part of the land has been going over to truly affordable homes that ordinary people in Southwark can afford, I'm going to extend my discretion that this is an enclosed space. It will be opened up. It will provide affordable homes, and I'm also heartened that it will be provide a biodiversity which will enhance the area. But this is a truly an exception, and it's not the rule. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Salmon wishes to speak but can't raise her hand. Go ahead, Councillor Salmon.
I'm actually going to agree with a huge amount that Martin's just said. He put it very eloquently. Also, I'm minded to support what the local councillors were saying as well about the need for affordable homes down there, the fantastic amount of green they've got in the area. And that they really are crying out. They know the area best. They know the area best. And I do think, and I think Martin had touched on this as well, that one photograph that just shows that it's all enclosed. It's not benefiting anyone. I know what David's saying about trees and birds and things, but at the end of the day, this is central London. We have a terrible housing shortage, and what's being suggested I think is acceptable, but we have to make it incredibly clear why we are doing this on this one occasion. and that it doesn't mean the floodgates are open for everyone to, you know, load us with loads of applications for MOL land. So that's my bit on that. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Babudu.
Thank you, Chair. I essentially agree with what Councillor Seaton and Councillor Simon have said. Whilst I've definitely been conflicted by this one, the combination of 100% affordable homes with a solid proportion of that being social rent, and they're good size as well, like that real challenge around like kind of 3-bed properties, that really does seem to be like kind of quite additive. And whilst I have some, it's unfortunate that the land is as it is at present. The kind of opening of it does seem also to be very additive. And whilst I'd agree with kind of Councillor Mills here that we probably shouldn't get into the landscaping of it, it does seem important that we set the stall out for clear enough signage that makes apparent that it is public, at least, even if we're not, you know, placing benches in it and the like.
Thank you. Councillor Noakes.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, like my colleagues, I think it's a very difficult decision, and it's a very finely balanced decision. I suppose my two concerns are, one, obviously, that other developers or owners of Metre on land don't see this as a green light to allow their MOL to fall into a poor state of repair and then come along and ask us to give consent to build on it. And my other observation rather than a concern is that obviously of the 10 properties, 6 of them are shared ownership. So I suppose, I'm not an expert in shared ownership, but presumably they eventually can become essentially private homes. People can, I think, in most cases, buy out their shared ownership over some years. So having said that, I agree with Councillor Babudu about I think we have to give weight to the fact that of the 10 properties that are being proposed, 9 of them are going to be 3-bedroom, and 3-bedroom is obviously hugely valuable. And I think, you know, absolutely worth having. And obviously the 4 social rented are absolutely worth having. I think I would, in regards to the sort of green space in the debate, obviously it was helpful to hear from the ward councillors. I think I would be happy to amend condition 4, I think it is, to just say, you know, I'm happy not to design the park tonight, or to have a big sign that necessarily says public park or pocket park. But I do want to, I suppose the 2 things I want is that it's clear that it is a public space, and secondly that it's landscaped appropriately for that purpose. And I'm happy to leave that to officers, but I think the condition needs to be strengthened to say that it's clearly landscaped and signposted as a public space, because it is absolutely part of why we're agreeing to make this very rare exception if we decide to do that. So happy not to say that it must have benches and it must be laid out in a particular way, but I do want it to be clear that it's landscaped and signposted as a public space and it's not part of the garden or something. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Chopra.
Thank you, Chair. We all know that there is a great shortage of housing in London, and especially in Southwark. And I agree with Martin and Budu and all the other colleagues that we should accept this into exceptional circumstances. I know it's not very normal and usual, but keeping the exceptional circumstances, especially in this part, in Peckham Roy, I think it's a good development, especially all the 10 properties are for the social purpose. So I think it's a very good sign. I think we should accept this as a good venture. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Werner, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I think I will speak. So I do have reservations about building on metropolitan open land. I really do, especially, you know, green land. But from what I've heard tonight, it seems like the biodiversity of the area in the park will actually be enhanced and improved. That's my understanding. And if that's the case, then I think it's worth it in order to provide these affordable homes for people in the area. And I would like to put a stipulation that we will protect any nesting birds. And I would also like to express a reservation about the parking. I think we should be encouraging development free parking, development free from parking, and just focus on providing cycle storage for developments. I don't think we should be allowing any parking in any new development. So I don't know whether yeah, that's my personal opinion, and I thought that that's something we were aiming to do. So I'm a bit disappointed. I know it's only 2 spaces, but again, we shouldn't be encouraging driving in the city. But overall, I think if the land if the biodiversity is increased and also it's providing affordable homes as well, I think both those things are really important. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like most people are in favour. Are there any amended conditions? I think it was David who had a condition he wanted to put forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's condition 4, which is in the main report on page 59, which is all about the authorising the landscaping. I just, and officers may be able to help on this, but I've got an
old version.
Words that I was just coming up with were that you know, the landscaping needs to be done or it needs to be appropriately landscaped and signposted so as to indicate it, to make it clear it's a public space. Something along that. Would that be good enough, or do we need to? Do I need to put more detail into it?
No, I don't think.
If you're happy for me to.
Go on.
Depeche?
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say, yes, by all means, that condition can be amended. And there was also the condition that Councillor Werner mentioned about no felling of trees during the nesting season.
Yeah, I also do have concerns about the parking, but I don't know whether anything can be done about that.
Would it help if we just sort of provide you with a comment on the parking? It's a low PTAL, public transport accessibility area, so it's one of the parts of the borough where that's not served by great public transport provision. I think the idea is if we have a wheelchair user or disabled person using that particular dwelling, that it's reasonable for them to want to park a car there. There's also some of the objections refer to parking stress on the site as well. So the other space would be to slightly alleviate that. And there is a requirement for the developer to provide free car club membership for any residents. So there would be parking, but it's because it's in a very low PTAL.
Okay, and can you just remind me, will there be cycle storage available for every resident in the building?
Yes, there will. It complies with the requirements of the London Plan.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret's got her hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that I think that the condition 4 that's being referred to is from the withdrawn report, because currently there is no landscaping condition, and the planning officer made that point in his oral presentation that's been omitted and needs to be included as part of the decision if you're minded to approve.
So do we have to say what that is at the moment? Do we have to, or can we just say a landscaping condition will be inserted?
I think that's fine for Officer's Chair, a landscaping condition with special mention of the fact that it needs to be signposted and made clear that it's a publicly accessible space.
Okay. In that case, then, I would like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendation as set out in paragraph 1 as a report on page 10 of the agenda pack. That planning permission is granted subject to legal agreement and conditions, including a landscaping condition which informs the public that this is a site which is open to the public in the form of signage. Is that okay?
And sort of designed and landscaped, and yeah.
Say again?
Designed and signposted. So I suppose because it's being designed as a space where the public can come into.
Okay. So the including a landscape condition which provides for the fact that it is open and available for members of the public to use, and is signed as such.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as all those elements are captured, yeah.
Pardon?
Sorry, I was just saying, as long as those elements are captured, I think it's
yeah. The signage, and it's open for everyone to use. And also noting the changes to the condition in the addendum we need to mention as well.
Chair, if I may, there were also some conditions that Glenn referenced in his presentation, and the condition that Councillor Werner suggested on felling of trees outside of the nesting period.
Okay. So I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations both in the main report and in the addendum, and include a landscaping condition which shows that the site is open and accessible and signed as such, and also that no trees will be felled during nesting season. If a legal agreement is not completed by 30th of September 2020, the Director of Planning be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate, for the reason detailed in paragraph 73 of the report. Does any member of the subcommittee wish to second this?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Babudu. So we'll move to the vote. I'll call on the voting members of this subcommittee by name and ask them to confirm whether they vote in favour or against the motion or wish to abstain. Councillor Jane Salmon, for, against, abstain.
Sorry, in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Babudu.
For, Chair.
Councillor Chopra.
For, Chair.
Councillor Noakes.
For, Chair.
Councillor Seaton.
For, Chair.
Councillor Werner.
For, Chair.
And I am Councillor Kath Whittam and I vote in favour. So the motion is carried.
Okay.
I believe that now concludes, that is our last item of business. Thank you for attending the latest virtual meeting of this subcommittee. Hooray!
Thank you, Chair. Well done.
Thank you, Chair.